the business business community. So it raises a lot of political questions. If you want to have a different kind of agreement, it seemed to me that the focus has to be on a different process. That's the first point. So I'd like to hear people about why they think, what's the new process? Or are we getting ourselves back into a kind of NAFTA, them against the rest of the country? The second thing on the benefits, I think it's a very tough sell because all the claims that were made for NAFTA have proven actually to be false, both on the job creation front, on the type of GDP gains, gains to the economy. They were way overstated. Most of the benefits from NAFTA came from the 62-cent dollar. We have a lot of econometric analytical studies that show Canadian growth is just driven by a devalued dollar. The gains disappear when the Canadian dollar goes up to 90 cents, or it's at 82 cents now, but when it changes quite dramatically. So there has to be a different reason for a Canada-EU. And I think it's really the other reasons which are its principal selling points as a counterweight to the United States. And the fact that Canada and Europe might not have a lot of trade, but we have a lot of ties. And the trade agreement may be a framework for strengthening all those ties culturally and socially. And so I'd like you to hear on those points.
I'd like to address that because I disagree with some of the things you say and I agree with some of the things you say. Of course, and first to go back to NAFTA, the strength of the dollar has had an effect on the trade relationship. But at the same time, if you're not able to form supply chains across borders, if you have to pay a tariff on any product that you ship across a border, that's going to put you at a competitive disadvantage. And it's going to create an industry that is isolated and sticks with the same old tired technology and goes on and on and on. Automotive sector, to a degree, has done that. Our nuclear sector has certainly done that. And if you look at the case of the nuclear industry and the power generation industry and all those types of industries in Europe, their evolution has been largely guided by the fact that they had this expanded market in which they were able to go out and relatively barrier-free. Now, where I do agree is it is an option. It is a counterweight to the United States. And the cultural and sort of institutional values of the two sides are very much in line. I would never advocate a very dominant country negotiating a free trade agreement with a smaller country that's unable to defend its interests, because it's just not fair and it doesn't work, and in the long term it's detrimental, which is that old model of trade negotiations. But these are relatively, in terms of level of sort of political, cultural, institutional, and economic development, there's a par. And so it makes a lot of sense to do it. And frankly, when I hear of all the different trade agreements that the Canadian government wants to pursue, this is the only one that really makes a lot of sense to me.
Like to comment, yeah?
I mean,
sure.
Again, I would also say we also have, these reasons, new transatlantic links, but there are also clear commercial reasons. When I see my country, we have a trade relationship with Canada where we have a continuous trade surplus of about $6-7 billion, and I could, let's say as a German now, very well imagine that under a liberalized regime, this surplus has potential to grow. But in other cases, there are 27 EU members. Canada might have potential benefits in other sectors, which I at the moment couldn't list. But but for Canada, really, it's 500 million consumers, where you have a free market access, and it's Canada exports 80% to the US and can be only good to diversify a bit better.
Okay, Yves?
I'm Yves Tiberghi from the Department of Political Science here. I had a couple of political questions. from the EU side, isn't there a great asymmetry, in fact, in this thing with the role of the US? That is, from the EU side, isn't the negotiation with Canada mainly an idea of setting a precedent, preparing the road for something later with the US, or a Trojan horse possibility through Canada? But the US must be a massive element in anything the EU is negotiating with Canada. It's different with the EU, with Canada. On the Canadian side, I remember having dinner with Ross Hunby, the ambassador of the EU from Canada a year ago, and he said the main job he has to do is essentially trying to have an input in the regulatory process of the EU, because that's the biggest impact on Canada. The EU is really in the business of uploading its regulatory standards at the world level, and so the Canadian interest is best represented by trying to have an input in a lot of those decisions early on. So is there some of that in the scoping document? Is that Canadian interest in there? Behind all this, I'm also wondering whether the real political motivation. Why is, for example, this Canada-EU moving forward when the Canada-Japan has been on the back burner for years and has not moved forward? So what's the political will here that's different? Is there a push from the Conservative Party? Is there a more bureaucratic push? Is it really a business community push and linkages with some MPs? Why is it moving here and not with Japan, for example? And on the EU side, the same question. Which countries are really critical? Is it more a commission thing, a business commission linkage? Is the EP involved? And who are really making that possible?
For all of you, so
There's maybe there's a lot of different questions here, and hopefully I've got them. U.S. Yes, the U.S. is a player in this respect, but positively and negatively. And negatively, if we start the negative and then go to the positive, that's worked up. Negatively, it's Canada has a free trade agreement with the U.S. Canada does not have a free trade agreement with the EU. Well, we can maintain and probably enhance our competitive position with Canada vis-a-vis the U.S. by trying to have a free trade agreement with them. That's a simple equation. On the positive side, yes, we can do it first, and do it with Canada first, and set an example for what could possibly become a North American type. But at this stage, there isn't the will there to do that. But yes, certainly that's something there, and certainly our office and I think other offices have had questions from U.S. interests as to what's happening, where are we going on this, et cetera, et cetera. So those are just simple. That's not giving you everything, but that just says yes, the U.S. is a player. Regulatory matters, yes, that's an issue, but it works both ways. I mean, we have problems. I deal with it on a continuous basis, problems with the regulatory aspects here. Canada, and we may get to the U.S. as well, some of its regulatory standards are very close to North American standards, vis-a-vis world or North America or European standards. So this is a way of trying to get some sort of convergence as well. So the issue of Ambassador Hornby, obviously his side is looking for Canadian interests into Europe. We are obviously looking at European interests the other way, so it works both ways in that respect. Your last point, I'm sorry.
Or with Canada, EU versus Canada, Japan?
I think that's, as I said, Canada was not on the first wave of FTAs with global on the global Europe approach for vis-a-vis FTAs. We also had the TIA experience, which was not a good experience for negotiations, particularly because the provinces didn't come